during exam season, you have exams in addition to everything else that you're already doing, right? So you can't just put in the same amount of effort and expect to get the same results that you're getting because you just don't have enough time. So yes, you're going to have to sacrifice some things. You're going to have to sacrifice some social life. You're going to have to sacrifice, a little bit of going out or having fun or whatever that is. But that's not what you're here for. You're here to actually know exactly how to do this. So I'm going to show you. During the exam season, understand that you can't afford to be lucky. When you try to be lucky on an exam, it doesn't work out very well, right? Because you're just trying to hit a certain type of question and you're just focusing on a certain type of question. And then what happens? Boom, you get hit with a question that's not the one that you expected and you're screwed. So you can't afford on luck. How do you get rid of luck? Volume. Understand that learning, it works like a machine. How does a machine work in learning? You have an input and you have a process and you receive an output. What happens after the output? This is where they stop. That's a problem. Because what you need after the output is you need feedback. And the rate at which you get feedback and that you take in feedback and internalize it and move it back into the input, this is your rate of learning. So to increase the amount of learning that you can do, you need to increase not just the input, because you're going to get that anyway. You're going to have a lot more to do. You're going to have assignments piling up, especially when it comes to November and even October, right? You're going to have a lot of tests. That's why we're here. So instead of just getting input, you need to, one, have a process that works every time. So if you haven't gone and, if you haven't attended the previous lecture that I gave on the pre-grade framework, I actually made a recording. It's on my YouTube channel. You can go watch that. But I'll just write it here, because I'm not going to explain it again. But this is the process that I use to learn and internalize as much information as possible, right? So after that, then you get the output. This is everything that you are putting, that if you were to test yourself, like a practice test or anything like that, this is the output. And then you get feedback on it. That's when you check your grades, right? So the amount of feedback that you can get means that you have to put in more effort to get there. And if you get there, then you can put it back into the input because you've received the feedback, whether it's right or wrong. You spend more time on the wrong stuff, less time on the right stuff. This is how you increase that cycle faster. In psychology, this whole thing, the learning like a machine, this is called, I'll put it here, the information processing model. And I could go into a lot more detail on this, but for the sake of simplicity and time, because we don't have a lot of time here, we're just going to go with this. One other thing that's really important to know is that when you go through this process, there's going to be a lot that you miss. Why is there going to be a lot that you miss? Well, because people have blind spots. And the funny thing about blind spots is that you're actually the only one who can't see them. So when you have a blind spot, what do? It's the same thing with learning. You just need to increase the volume that you are putting into the system, right? So increase volume, which as a consequence decreases your reliance on luck. And because you have more stuff coming in, there's a smaller chance that you're going to miss something, that something's going to fall through the cracks. But to fill in the blind spot, you need something, some input that's not your own. Because if you only rely on the stuff that you know, then you're not filling any blind spots. Because blind spots are, again, they're only seen by people or anyone on the outside, because you can't see them. So how do we fix this problem that we can't put in more new, novel information into the system because we have a blind spot? There are a couple ways. One, study with a friend. They probably know something that you don't. Just make sure that they're not chatty friends. One really good tip that I have for this, if you're ever studying in the library, your friends are talking, you can't focus, blah, 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 only study with one at a time. Because if you only study with one friend at a time, then if you're not talking, they can't talk. They have no one to talk to. And make sure that they are on the same academic level as you or slightly above. I understand that you want to help your friends out, but when it comes to the exam season, you really don't have a lot of time. Because you don't have a lot of time, you can't spend time explaining things over and over again. It is good to explain to your friends, what something means, to practice articulating your thoughts, but it's better to do that with somebody who actually knows what the correct answer is, and that way they can give you, again, feedback. on what it is that you come and put out of the system. So, number one, study with a friend. Number two, you can use AI. This is the D part of the pre-grade framework, where you're going to use AI. You're going to use the chat function, or you can just text, put it into the computer, but I think it's much faster to just say it and have it say it back to you. Chat function of AI. And this is going to give you some of the most immediate feedback possible. Because as soon as you say something, this is what I like to do, is I'll be like, hey, I'm going to explain this thing to you. Tell me if it's right or wrong. Blah, 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 blah. I say a bunch of words. Then it says, wow, how insightful you are. And then I'm like, oh, thank you, obviously. But it will also tell you, you were correct in this aspect, but there's something else that you could have said that was a little bit better. You could have explained it better. Or it will just reiterate everything you say in a better way. And you practice saying that again and again and again until you can't get it wrong. If you have watched my previous video, you would know what not getting it wrong means. Not getting it wrong, the 3 3s, which means you're going to do something until you get it right 3 times in a row for 3 days in a row. And then after you get it right 3 days in a row, you're going to do it every 3rd day. So I guess 1/3 of, I'll just write it like this. Every 3rd day, all right? That's 3 3s. You're going to do this until your exam. That way you can't get it wrong. And I actually wanted to quantify it so that you have a way to know when you're done studying something. Because otherwise you're going to be super stressed. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I know it well enough. Yeah, you do. You've done this. You don't need to do more than that. Okay? That's the first thing. Now that you have your learning system, you know how to cover your blind spots, we get into prioritizing. This is what to do when to make sure that you don't miss anything while you're trying to stay on top of exams. This is very important because a lot of people don't know how to prioritize effectively. So I'm going to show you right now. I like to put things on a chart. I don't like to make lists. I don't like to make planners. I think that's a lot of extra stuff that you don't need to do. And the reason for that is because, one, planning to do the thing is not doing the thing. And two, thinking about doing the thing is not doing the thing. A lot of us like to think about how much stuff we have to do, and all that does is stress you out because it doesn't help you make progress, right? I know all of you do it. I know you do it, right? Okay, so don't think about the thing. Don't plan to do the thing. Just do the thing, and I'm going to show you which things to do so you never have to think about it. Take this chart. This is your what thing to do chart. This one is the due date. In other words, how soon is it due? On this side, you're going to have the weight. And this is going to be time. And there's going to be an inverse relationship most of the time. So if something is due really soon, let's say this would be the date of due, and it's probably going to follow something like this until the due date. And then you have weight. How much is it worth? If something's worth a lot and it's due really soon, then you're in trouble. It crosses this line. If something's worth a lot, but it's not due soon, then you're over here. If something's worth a lot and it's due really soon, then you're over here and you're in really big trouble. And this is why you're stressed. If you're thinking about doing this, but you don't have a lot of time between this, right? Thinking about it's not going to help. So let's say you have an exam that's right here. And you have something due here, and you have something due here, and you have something due here. You also have something due here. Okay, what do I do? How do I know which one of these to do? How do I know when to start that thing? Obviously, you want to break things up, right? You don't want to do everything on the same day because that's really annoying and it stresses you out. And there's something that's called the allostatic load, which I'm going to explain really quickly so you guys know what I'm talking about. So your allostatic load is essentially your stress. Your allostatic load looks something like this. If you were to have stressors, right? So if your allostatic load looks something like this, and you go like this, and you go like this, boom, we'll have this mark here. This is your stress limit. This would be your homeostasis stress point. When you get a stressor, it's going to spike your stress. If it brings you above the limit here, then your body's going to react. It's going to bring it down to try to get you back to set point or below. over time, when this happens again and again and again, your set point moves. So now this would become your new set point, and you'd have a new stress limit here. Wow, that was a terrible line. Okay, say this is your new stress limit, and anytime you go above this, it's going to bring you back down to there. You can try to maintain here, and then you go here. So what happens when you go above the stress point? Well, there are 3 phases of stress. The first is when you go and get the stressor. So when the stressor is induced here, stressor induce, SI, this is the alarm phase. Your body's like, oh my gosh, you're starting to get stressed. So you then have the resistance phase, or the reactance phase, either one. And this is where your body does all the crazy stuff that you know, like produce cortisol and elevate your heart rate. It basically tries to help you manage stress. And the funny thing is, all this stuff, all that cortisol, that's actually really good for you because it stimulates the pathways. I'm not going to get into all of them because it's a lot and you don't need to know it, but it basically, that is the response to the alarm to try to bring you back down to your allostatic set point. And a lot of people think that it's actually bad, so they try to mitigate that. But what actually happens is that if you get too far, you're stressed for too long, or you experience too much stress, you enter the exhaustion phase. That's what burnout is. This is, you don't want to end up here, because then you feel like garbage all the time you wake up, you're like, my life is over. And it might feel like it because you're pretty exhausted. And so how do you get from here back to maintenance, I guess? Well, you don't want to dampen cortisol, because cortisol is what allows you to protect yourself against the stress, right? But if you have it for too long, you're too high above this threshold, you get exhausted. And so we'll talk about stress management in a little bit, but in other words, this is what you need to know so that you don't end up doing everything all at once, because you don't want to end up here. That's the point I was trying to make. And I'll make another presentation later on. We're going to go in how to deal with stress. I'm going to give you a little hint. Anything that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest, things like hot showers, hot baths, stretching, yoga, meditation, all that stuff. Everything that people tell you to do that you don't, do that. So, what do? You have 3 things due, and then you have a midterm coming up. Oh my gosh, Simon, I'm so stressed. Well, you have this one here. This one's not due for a little bit longer. This one's in the middle. This one, honestly, in my personal opinion, I can only focus on 3 things at once. So I'm not even going to think about this one. I know I have to think about this one. So we're going to focus on these 2 and this one. Here, I'm going to ask myself which one's worth more. If they're both worth the same amount, cool. Whichever one's due first, do that. If they're worth a different amount, this is where it gets tricky. Because if something is worth, let's say, 10% of your grade, the other one's worth 5, the one that's worth 5 is here, or sorry, the one that's worth 5 is here, the one that's worth 10 is here. Which one do you do? Well, there's a couple variables to keep in mind. One, how are you doing in the class? Class progress, or class performance. Number 2, how long is it going to take? However long you think it's going to take, I can tell you, based on personal experience and a little case study that I did myself, it was actually timed how long I thought, or I told myself, I wrote down how long I thought things would take. And then I went and actually measured how long things would take. I set a timer every time I worked on it. On average, over the course of 1 month, it took me 1.6 times as long as I thought it would. So what do I do now? Oh, I just say that it's going to take me twice as long. And then I'm really happy with myself because I finish it faster than 2 times. Right? It's all about perspective. If I were to say, oh, it's only going to take me like 1.2 times as long because I think I can do it faster, and then I know that this is my average, then I'm going to be really unhappy with myself every single time I get it wrong, or I end up working past what I thought it would be. It's not the way you want to do it. Give yourself extra time, plan a little bit ahead. But This is when you're stressed. You don't have time to plan ahead. So, how well you're doing? How long is it going to take? The third thing, this is the last one that you really need to keep in mind, is can you get an extension? Because if you can get an extension, then you can push it past there, right? And if, let's say you have two things that are pretty much exactly the same, right? At that point, just pick one. So we don't need to really get into that. If it's both, they're both worth 5%, like you have another one right here, they're both worth 5%, they're pretty much the exact same thing. Just pick one and start it and then move on to the second one. Don't work on both at a time. If you work on both at a time, this is essentially multitasking. And multitasking doesn't exist. What you're really doing is attention switching. All right, so I'm going to show you something that's going to prove that multitasking doesn't exist. However long that took me in the recording, I'm just going to put a timer. So it's probably like not very long, maybe 10 seconds max. Now we have multitasking doesn't exist. On the second line, I'm going to write this exactly again, but I'm going to write, now you understand. And what we're going to do is we're going to write the first letter of the first sentence, the first letter of the second sentence, second letter of the first sentence, second letter of the second sentence. Cool? We're going to multitask. Okay. We have multitasking now. Now. I understand. Task D under student task to understand. Okay, you get the point. It's getting boring, right? Took me way, way longer, didn't even finish the sentence. If I were to write now I understand again, it would probably take me another max 10 seconds. That was longer than 20 seconds. Okay, so clearly multitasking isn't a thing. Attention switching is worse. And I actually will take in less information if I'm trying to study and switching between two things than if I were to just do one at a time. If there's a gray area here, then sometimes I'll just pick one. Maybe something's worth 7% and it's due a day later than the thing that's worth 5%. Or yeah, like it really does not matter that much. The thing is when you have a big discrepancy is what I'm trying to get at. Let's say that this one is worth 5% here and this one is worth 10% here. Whichever class you're doing better in, pick that one first. But honestly, this one is probably going to take longer. So you can work on this one a little bit, maybe do like a third. And then this one here, you can probably do half. And then let's say that this is a 2-day time frame, right? 2 days. So boom, you do half here. You're already halfway done with that one. You're a third of the way done with that one. This is probably another like 2 to 3 days of time frame, right? So you're going to be done with both before you reach your exam. You can start working on this third one here. This is how you're going to approach prioritizing during the exam season. Also keep in mind, one thing is that if this is your exam right here, this is the exam, the big scary exam. Okay. Time before an exam is infinitely more valuable than time after an exam. So if you're going to work on a project, just do it with the understanding that you're taking time away from studying. That being said, if you can't focus anymore, sometimes it's better to just work on a project instead because at least you're getting something done than nothing. Just don't spend any time thinking about doing the work and how much you have to do. Just write it out, pick one, and do it. Just start. Nothing is as effective as starting. Let me show you another graph, because you know I like my graphs. Okay, I'm going to write it really small here. If this is your productivity over time, if you're going to start an assignment, productivity looks like this, right? Or something more realistically is probably more like that. Okay, either way, what happens when you go from 0 to 1? Infinite increase in productivity. What happens, so this would be 0. We'll say this is 1, say this is 2, this is 3, This is 4. Okay, so this is 4. What happens when you go from 1 to 2? That's a 2x increase. What happens when you go from 2 to 3? That's a 50% increase. What happens when you go from 3 to 4? It's a 30% increase. In other words, nothing is better than starting. There is no preparation. There is no routine that is going to help you be more productive than simply starting and getting an infinite increase in productivity. Understand? Cool. All right. So now we know how to prioritize during the exam season. This is how you deal with all of the assignments versus the exams. Well, Simon, you might be asking, what do I do if I have multiple exams on the same day? All right, I'm going to tell you a story. One time, first year little Simon had 2 exams on the same day. One was chemistry, one was biology. You might be thinking, oh, okay, so they're basically the same thing. No. See, I was good at biology. I sucked ass at chemistry. So what did I do? Well, which one was first of all? First was bio. Bio was 9 a.m. This was my Bio 120 exam. By the way, this was before I knew how to study. And so I think it'll be a good story to put you guys in a similar position. So 9 a.m. bio exam. When was my chemistry exam? All the way down here. I think it was like 5 p.m. or maybe 6. I'll just say 5 because I don't remember. Okay, Bio 120, the exam was an hour and a half, 90 minutes. So all the way till 10:30. Chemistry, 3 hours. Okay, to 8 p.m. Everybody knows that I'm a grandpa and I don't do well with this. I don't do well with nighttime exams. And it was my worst subject. So what did I do? How did I deal with this problem? Okay, Bio 120, there's no way around this. I either get up really early or I study the night before. What did I do? I was actually smart this time. I studied the night before. Okay, night before. I also studied from 6 a.m. to about 8 p.m. Or sorry, 8 a.m. And this was the time when I was developing my 1-hour pre-exam protocol. If you don't know what that is, it's basically how I peak myself for, I guess, maximum cognitive performance on an exam. I was still developing it, but I implemented it here from 8 to 9 a.m. You can download it for free on my website if you want. It's just a PDF. Yeah. Okay. I studied the night before and the day of, right? Because I was cramming. I didn't know how to study. Okay. From here, after this, 10:30 a.m. Okay. Honestly, like these next 30 minutes, they're just yap time. So count that as gone. It's already 11 a.m. Or transition time, you're walking back from the exam center. Now you have 11 to 5. What do you do? Okay. We know that the 1-hour pre-exam protocol, we want this to go from 4 to 5. So we're going to carve out that time already. Now we have 11 to 4. That's 5 hours. You need at least 20 minutes for lunch. So we'll get rid of that. We'll put that in here. Let's say we want an hour and a half long study block, so 12:30 to, let's say, 1 p.m. We have lunch, because realistically, there's also a lot of yapperage going on there. Okay, 1 to 4, I would say that you can use this chunk of time. That's 3 hours. This is where you're going to spend 2 of these hours, so you're going to go until 3 p.m. studying alone, and then 1 hour until 4, you're going to study with people. People who know, again, more than you, because they're going to tell you what you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know, because you have a blind spot. This was a schedule that worked for me back then. Now, I kind of just review for like an hour before each exam, and it's not that bad. And I do that using the pre-grade framework, and I do that throughout the semester. But if you're trying to cram, then this was the only time where I ever really felt confident going into both exams. Even though I was worse at chemistry, and I had it at a time where my focus, by the way, it stops working like right here, right around like 6 p.m. So, and I also have ADHD, so if it works for me, it'll probably work for you too. Now, what do you do if you have an assignment on this day also? You do it beforehand. You don't have time to do it today, right? Because time before the exam is infinitely more important. So if you're going to do one of those in here, it's not going to end up well for you, because you need this time, especially when you're stressed. By the way, so cortisol, as we talked about over there, it actually dampens how much, like when you're stressed, you don't remember as much, right? So if you're to take time away from here, you're going to be even more stressed. You're not going to, one, do your assignment effectively, and two, study as well afterwards. So just get rid of it, eliminate that variable, right? Remember we said we only want to focus on 3 things at once, right? To me, that's on an everyday basis, that's school. That's like, okay, here, right, there's 2 assignments, 1 midterm, 3 things, right? So for me on an average day basis, it's school, it's making videos for all of you, doing these events, and then it's rowing. Those are my 3 things. Anything above that, if I start getting, taking on more projects, I just can't do it. Like, at least not for extended periods of time. So the same goes in school. I only do 3 things in school, 3 things with UofTearless and 3 things in rowing. So on an average day, or I guess this wouldn't be an average day, on any day, no more than 3 things, but 3 things is the max. So if you do 2, you're probably fine. You're probably in that allostatic load tolerance range. But if you end up in 3, you're pushing the limit here, right? You're pushing the stress limit. You don't want to push the limit, because if you hold it for too long, you end up in exhaustion. And the worst possible thing is to end up with exhaustion right here, right before your test, which is also one of the reasons why you put the pre-exam protocol into place, because it helps you clear your mind and it helps you get ready to take the exam and perform your best. So using all of this, fill your blind spots, increase your knowledge and the amount of volume, the amount of feedback that you get less stressed, deal with multiple exams on the same day, and now you know how to prioritize, even with exams.